Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back in with you guys for another show, for another episode of our tactical breakdown series. It's been a little while since we've done one of these, breaking down the sort of tactics of the game, players that we're linked to, specific problems that Unai Emery might have. And that is certainly where we are at today with the discussion topic for this, well, it's pretty dreary Wednesday afternoon, to be honest. It's getting to that point in the year now where British weather, we can expect it to be a little bit more regular. But I hope you are well. I hope you're joining us in happy spirits because football is finally returning the way it should do in terms of the club format. And obviously, we have to wait still because Arsenal, as always, are given the hard end of the stick of being playing on a Monday again. So we've got to wait all weekend until we can see the boys in red and white compete at Bramall Lane against Sheffield United. Now, before that point, of course, you're going to get plenty of shows. You're going to get the Eyes of the Opposition show. You're going to get the Quick Take show and probably some press conference stuff and maybe some raw reaction discussion type shows as well, all the way leading up to that game on Monday night in which we will react as well. But thank you ever so much, everyone that's tuning in this afternoon, taking time out of their afternoon on a Wednesday to have a little bit of a chat and discussion about what are we going to do when Alexandre Lacazette returns to the team. So let's see what's using the chat right now. Tony Mills, thank you for tuning in, mate. Zlatko, my day's been all right, thanks, Tony. Thanks for asking. Gary Hardy, good evening. Arsenal Nation, Omar is in there, and Joe Ince was right in here, right at the beginning, before the show had even started, to say that Oba on the side is like keeping your Lamborghini parked behind your house. Now, I can't really disagree too much with that, to be honest, because we're going to go into the reason why Aubameyang being affected by Lacazette returning could have a rather detrimental impact on how we might play moving forwards. But ultimately, there are two sides to this, and we're going to look into both of them. But there's only one way in which we can do that. And if you've been watching the show for a little bit, you know the website that I like to use. Going on that lineup builder and having a bit of a discussion and a play around with what Arsenal might do come the Monday night game against Sheffield United. So you can see that the team that I've got. Now, this is based off not personally what I would pick, but sort of what I'm expecting to happen. The only one I'm slightly off with, I think, is maybe Chambers. Maybe Bellerin will come back in because he's had 2 weeks. He's had a few under-23s game, played in the Europa League as well. Maybe he's ready to return. And only on that press conference, which I believe might be Friday, we will find out what, in fact, Unai Emery is going to pick. Now, obviously, this is the sort of midfield which we're used to seeing. Sabas, maybe Willock, Guendouzi and Xhaka, but it's the front line what we are interested in looking at today. Now, I don't think Lacazette will return immediately into the team because he's been off for a while with an injury, and usually we like to see players sort of eased back in to make that transition process and reintegration as smooth as possible. So my imagining is that Pepe, Aubameyang and Saka will start the game against Sheffield United, unless obviously in the press conference we're told that Laca is completely fine, he's ready for selection, he could start, then maybe we'll see a change. But it's here today, what we're here to discuss is what actually might happen in terms of the structure. So in the chat box, sort of, what would you sort of like to see us do with Lacazette at this point? Because the whole thing for me is about this guy. It's about Aubameyang. He's the biggest factor in this. We know that his scoring potential and the way that he scores goals and just the predatory nature that he has is something that gets so much more diminished when you play him on that left wing, playing him out wide and bringing, well, I'm going to be represented by Saka at this moment, but bringing Lacazette central in this position, it takes so much away from the Gabonese striker. And it's not really something that we can afford to do because we've got a run of fixtures up until the Man City game, I believe it is. Disregard the cup game against Liverpool for this sort of Premier League run. There's an away fixture against Leicester, which is no mean feat, which is a mean feat, most certainly. And for these games, we really need to take advantage of the fact that we need to get more goals up. The goal difference, I think, is going to be something that's really key come the end of the season. It's something that I don't think can be underrated because we're going to have a lot of teams around us really competing for that top 4 spot. And goals are going to be important. So taking Aubameyang away from that central role most certainly has a detrimental impact on his game. Let's see what some of you guys are saying. Eman says, Oba has basically scored every game and you want to put him on the left. I don't. That's not my choice. I'm just looking at different scenarios at the moment. Gray says, I actually like that midfield, though I'd play Torreira over Xhaka or Xhaka if he wasn't at right back where he's holding. Again, this is just sort of where I see Emery going with it, not what I would pick. Omar says that means Oba returns to the left, which wouldn't be that great. Apparently, Laca can play in the number 10 role. So should we go with a 4-2-3-1 and Albert up top? Now, that's really intriguing. So if we're looking at Laca playing deeper, you're looking at him coming here, Alba going there. Ceballos can play at left wing, but I think it's going to be more Saka. And this being your lineup, is that good enough? I don't think Lacazette is the right guy to play a number 10. I don't think he's a midfielder. I think he is a forward. I think he's a centre forward. I think he's great to link up the play. I think he's great at sort of taking the ball, playing the ball in, playing those passes, especially those passes in behind wide. Like, he gets these balls in behind and sets up those wingers so much better than so many other players in our team. He's great at driving the ball forward, holding the ball up. His strength is certainly something that's underrated. And I just don't think he's the one for that number 10, because as a centre forward, he's great. But as a number 10 with Aubameyang in front of him, I'm not sure it works. The other way is if you go with a 4-4-1-1 with the wingers sort of pulled back a bit. And you're then left with kind of a 4-4-2 with Lacazette dropping in slightly behind as a second striker. Does that work? I don't think it works anywhere near as well with playing a 4-3-3. But for me, I think that Pepe will obviously continue to play on that side. But we could possibly see a scenario where if Pepe continues to struggle, Pepe is actually removed from the team. We see Aubameyang pushed out wide right. Ceballos comes back into the team, obviously playing as that number 10, Saka on the left, and Lacazette through the middle. And we've seen from the statistics, and if you watch one of our tactical breakdown videos throughout the summer, we looked at the statistics of Aubameyang playing on the right-hand side, and actually his strike rate, his goal per game, his passing accuracy, his crossing accuracy, all improved for him playing on that right-hand side. He is right-footed, he is very pacey, and as a winger and as a right forward, he did it a lot for Saint-Etienne, he did it for Dortmund, and that right-hand side role for Aubameyang is certainly something that's been effective in his game, and maybe it's something that we could see moving forward. But then that puts the big question mark on Pepe. You've spent £72 million on this guy. What do you do? Then you've got the likes of Martinelli and Nelson, and them vying for spots as well. We've got a lot of competition in this front line that I'm really not sure what Emery is going to have to do with this. Let's see what some more of your comments are saying. Sinner says, I'm so bored sitting over Heathrow in the lorry waiting to get loaded. Thank you for coming through and saving a bit of boredom. No problem. Much appreciated you tuning in today. Joseph says we should play 3-2-3-2. That's a really odd formation. I've never even seen. I don't even know how that would work. I think it'd be very narrow. I'm not sure that you would get the width that you would quite need. Omar says Laca is good at starting attacks from deep in midfield, hence is perfect for that number 10 role. Carl says that we should play 3-4-1-2 with Alba and Pepe up top, rotate Laca, 3 at the back, Bellerin and Tierney as wing backs. Again, I really, really struggle to see us playing with that back 3. Yes, it kind of solves the issue with Lacazette because you're saying that we should rotate him with Aubameyang. But I just think that if we're going to really be a top team, there is only one lineup that we can play. And I'm going to show you that lineup because it's a very obvious lineup. The lineup that we need to play is getting our front 3 with these guys because they're the best guys in the team. Yes, it takes away from Aubameyang on the left. It really, really does take it away. But I think that moving ahead, if you looked at Arsenal and you looked at the way that we played before the season started and you looked at what we were doing, the amount of hype around these as a front 3 coming forward and coming into the team was so big and there was so much hype around it that when Pepe sort of struggled and Aubameyang couldn't really impact the game as much as he might have done centrally, I think that ultimately led to a huge sort of decline in the opinion about these 3 as a front 3. Now, we saw in the game against Burnley that Aubameyang can be effective on that left-hand side. He cut inside from the left and he smashed that ball into the bottom left-hand corner. Now, yes, I agree that you don't get as much as you might want, especially when you consider that Pepe is a player that loves to cut inside. And if you're thinking about it, what you would want is you'd want more of a right-footed player like Nelson running down the wing, crossing that ball across for Aubameyang to obviously slot in as a poacher. Now, that works. The only problem is that Pepe is so left-footed that it really restricts what you're able to do with this lineup. And I think that's a big problem. Now, the only other way that this works is if maybe we try swapping Pepe and Aubameyang around. Again, we've already covered the fact that Pepe himself is a much better right winger because he loves cutting inside and he scored plenty of goals that way. But in terms of Aubameyang, we know that he's really good on that right-hand side. The only issue here is now that we really don't know what Pepe would be like playing on that left-hand flank. And he didn't really play much there for Lille. If you watch the game for Ivory Coast in which he scored, he was coming off the right. He came into the box. Zaha did a lot of the work on the left-hand side. I don't know how this would work. But my issue is, if we play with a formation that is with Aubameyang left and Pepe on the right, because Pepe can be found out and is so predictable and so easy to sort of contain because he's so left-footed, and Aubameyang has so much taken away from him playing on the left that it's not really a sustainable situation. You're always going to find that we get to about partway through the second half, we've really not affected the game as much as we might have liked to, and then a change has to be made. And that change will often see Lacazette come off for Saka or for Nelson or for Martinelli. Laca will come off, Saka will come on, and Aubameyang will go central anyway. And it'll make you think, if that's then successful, why didn't we just start that? So part of me thinks that maybe what we'll see is an actual rotation between Aubameyang and Lacazette continuously. Sometimes Lacazette will start, sometimes Aubameyang might be on the left, sometimes he might be rested. Obviously, there's games in the Europa League and the Cup games that we need to think about. There's a lot that we really need to consider. Let's see what some of you guys are saying a little bit more. Ayo says they have to interchange at the top. No More Champagne says a 4-4-2 solves this entire problem. Now, okay, let's look at this in a 4-4-2. The problem with looking at this in a 4-4-2 is the same problem, and the biggest reason why I ultimately think we didn't achieve what we needed to achieve last season. We didn't achieve Champions League football because we ultimately crashed. And that happened because a number of missed chances, agreed. But not only that, but the disconnect between these midfield and the front two, the gap between them, was so obvious and it was so clear that teams could disconnect and stop the service from that midfield to the front two that they became practically ineffective. They became so ineffective that we couldn't find enough of a through ball to the front two. We couldn't actually create any effective plays. Our wing play wasn't strong enough. Agreed, we didn't have Pepe, but that's a very crowded midfield for someone like Pepe to play in as sort of a right midfielder rather than a right winger. So saying that the 4-4-2 completely solves the problem, I don't think it does. I don't think it solves the problem because, one, Pepe doesn't suit a deeper right midfielder. Two, the disconnect between the midfield and the attack is huge and is really easy to stop, and other teams will know how to stop it because they showed that at the end of last season. And three, our left midfield isn't strong enough. And what I mean by isn't strong enough is I know Saka's got a lot of potential, but the protection to Tierney, who we know likes to move forward, just isn't enough. We also know that if Bellerin plays on that right back slot, that he will need protection, and Pepe has shown that he's not that into running back and tracking back and putting the challenges in. So there's some really big decisions that are going to need to be made by Unai Emery regarding how we fit this into our team. E-Man says, stop comparing Gnabry to Nelson. Gnabry was way better. I don't know who's comparing Gnabry to Nelson. Gnabry is a lot better. I agree with you. Gary Harder says, but that was the fault. That was the fault. I think he means of our centre mids. Need someone like Willock in there to move the ball forward. Okay, so then you ask the question, who do you take out for Willock? Well, if you're going to play in this formation, Gary, for me, you take out Xhaka, but then you're left with a midfield two that is very open and vulnerable. how can you drop Guendouzi at this point? How can you drop someone like him who's performed absolutely brilliantly? I mean, your mind says you take out Guendouzi and you put in Torreira because he's more of a terrier. He wins the ball back. He protects the back four. It's either that or you go with a diamond in the middle. But I know a lot of people don't really like the diamond, and you play like that. And if you play like that, the issue is, again, that the connection might be between Willock moving forwards and playing those balls in behind, but ultimately the gap then between the front three and the midfield three is an even bigger disconnect. So finding this and balancing this, all these different variables in making the decision for the lineup, again, I think is going to be a really, really big struggle. Vincent says we should go with 4-2-3-1, Alba, Ceballos and Pepe with Lacazette, Torreira and Guendouzi. 4-2-3-1 again with possibly Alba playing out left. It's really hard to try and think of Alba playing on the left because we've seen how detrimental to his game it has been. Wayne Wilson says play the same system as Liverpool and get done with it. The problem is because we've got very, very different players to Liverpool in the front three. At the start of the season, it looked like we were measuring up to Liverpool and saying that behind them, maybe we have the strongest front three in the league. Maybe City can compare with us with Aguero and Bernardo Silva and Sane when he was fit and Sterling. But it's a different system. The front three that we play is so different to Liverpool because whilst the striker role or the centre-forward role with Firmino and Lacazette is quite similar because they're both enablers, they both bring other players into play, the right and left side of it is different. Salah and Pepe, you can see more similarities because it's a left-footed right winger. But the difference between Mane and Aubameyang is stark. You compare Aubameyang and Mane as a striker, Aubameyang takes the plaudits all day long. You compare Mane to Aubameyang as a left winger, it's barely a conversation. Mane far outweighs any of the potential that Aubameyang gives us on the left wing. So it's not as easy as saying play it the same as Liverpool because we don't have the same mid-front three. And what's really important about the Liverpool is the ability of their fullbacks, Alexander-Arnold and Robertson, to get up and support those players, constantly bring the crosses in and have the energy to get back and be covered by the energy of Mane and by Salah. The other side of things is the midfield. You've got a midfield of Henderson, of Fabinho, and then there's obviously the difference between playing Wijnaldum or Oxlade-Chamberlain. Now, you've got two more passive players in Fabinho and Henderson with more of a driver of the ball in Wijnaldum or Oxlade-Chamberlain or possibly Naby Keita, but he's a little bit more passive than them. Where you've got a scenario there where you've got a very strong and solidified midfield. I actually think that if they were to add in one more player, possibly another creative player of real talent to that midfield, then, I mean, it's scary what they could do. But I just don't think that we've got the same level of quality behind the front three that enables us to play in the same way that Liverpool do. We don't press as much as Liverpool do. And it's a shame that we don't do that because we're quite scared to do that in a lot of the Premier League games. But pressing is a big thing that we need to improve in our team. And I feel that the likes of Pepe, with the mannerism that he has, he isn't the type to be a big presser. He's just not that player. AO says the two holder fill-in positions to allow the fullbacks forward. Jack Perry is agreeing with Tashi, who says that Laca, Pepe and Alba haven't played much together, but I think that Laca can drop a bit deeper in order for Pepe and Alba to take a more central role. If that's true, and I do agree with you, I think that is a possibility. Let's just whack this back up again. So if you've got this lineup, Xhaka, Guendouzi, I'm only putting Xhaka in because I think that's what Emery will pick, and then Ceballos. I think I removed Ceballos, Xhaka, Guendouzi. And then what you're saying is that effectively Laca would drop in, Pepe would move up. You'd sort of get more of a flat midfield three. So as a 4-3-1-2 with Laca in behind Pepe and Aubameyang. Could that work? I'm not sure. It's quite narrow because you then put in Aubameyang and Pepe more central. It's something that I think Mourinho was talking about. Certainly something that'd be interesting to do. I don't think that Laca would drop in all the time. I think that you would still end up playing with a flat 4-3-3 rather than the desired 4-3-1-2. But we would find that Aubameyang would push up and Pepe would push up, and maybe that would leave us with a 4-3-1-2. It could also leave us with the fact that Ceballos would also be supporting that in that midfield line. And maybe that could work too. It's a really, really tough one. It's a really, really tough one to sort of sort out what we're going to do. There's only one man that knows. There's only one man that knows what we're going to do on Monday against Sheffield United, and that's Unai Emery. We're going to have to wait and see what happens when both Bellerin and Tierney come back with Lacazette. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. If you're watching on playback, please leave in the comment section below what lineup you would go for. How would you manage the problem of Lacazette returning? Would you stick him in with front three with Aubameyang pushed out wide? Would you start to rotate Aubameyang and Lacazette together? Or would you personally choose to leave out Lacazette altogether and continue with the front three that we've got already? Maybe Pepe gets the chop, in your opinion. Please leave your comments below and let me know what you think. Thank you ever so much for tuning in this afternoon. I hope you've enjoyed the show. If you have, please give it a like. Please subscribe to the channel if you are new around here with those notifications turned on. So if you're watching on playback and wondering why these guys are getting all their thoughts heard in our live chats, because they've got their notifications on and they know when these shows go live so they can jump in and get their thoughts and questions heard. I'll see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.